I remember the smell. That is where it always begins for me. Not with a name, not with a rank, not with the creak of my knees or the ache in my jaw where the augmetic fused poorly to the bone. It begins with the smell of wet ferrocrete and promethium fumes in the lower stacks of Hive Korinthus. I was 14 standard years old. I did not know what an inquisitor was. I did not know what heresy meant beyond the word the preachers screamed from their pulpits on seventh day. I knew hunger. I knew the color of rust. I knew that my mother had stopped breathing 3 months before and that the administratum had not yet processed her death, which meant her ration chit still worked at the dispensary on level 42 if I kept my head down and didn't let the clerk see my face too clearly. My name is Mordecai Thane. I have served the holy orders of the Emperor's Inquisition for 163 standard years. I have held every rank that exists within its shadow. I have been the lowest thing that crawls in its service, and I have sat in chambers where a single word from my mouth could burn a world to cinders. I am going to tell you what each of those ranks actually felt like. Not what the archives say, not what the sanctioned histories record, what it tasted like, what it cost, every single rung of the ladder, from the mud to the stars. Let me begin in the mud. I was recruited the way most acolytes are recruited, not with ceremony, not with a letter bearing a wax seal. I was recruited because I happened to be in the wrong corridor on the wrong night, and I did something that caught the attention of someone I couldn't see. There was a man in the low markets of level 39 who had been selling counterfeit devotional icons. Small offense. Trivial, really, in the grand scope of imperial justice. But the icons weren't just counterfeit. The aquila on their surface had been subtly altered. 8 points on the wings instead of 7. A change so small you wouldn't notice unless you counted. I counted. I had always counted things. It was a compulsion my mother said I'd been born with. She called it my curse of noticing. I told a street Arbeitsenforcer. He laughed at me. I told a preacher. He ignored me. So I stole one of the icons and I brought it to the only place I thought anyone might care, the local ecclesiarchy mission house on level 44. I didn't know that the woman running that mission house was not a member of the ecclesiarchy at all. Her name was Inquisitor Hesperath Vale, Ordo Hereticus. She had been running that mission for 2 years as a cover while she tracked a network distributing corrupted devotional materials across 17 hive levels, and I, a starving 14-year-old orphan with rust under my fingernails, had just handed her the first physical sample her operation had been unable to secure. She looked at the icon. She looked at me. She said, "How did you know?" I said, "I counted the points." 3 days later, I was aboard a black-hulled shuttle with no markings, sitting on a metal bench next to 4 other children and 2 adults I had never met. None of us spoke. The shuttle smelled of antiseptic and gun oil. A servo skull floated near the ceiling, its eye lens blinking red every 9 seconds. I counted. I always counted. That was the day I became an acolyte. I need you to understand what that word means in practice, because it sounds far more dignified than the reality. An acolyte of the Imperial Inquisition is, at the lowest level, a disposable asset. You are a body, a pair of eyes, a set of hands that can hold a weapon or carry a data slate or open a door that needs opening. Inquisitor Vale had, at the time I joined her service, a retinue of 23 individuals. There were warriors, former Astra Militarum soldiers with hard eyes and harder hands. There were savants, their skulls studded with augmetic memory coils, who could process thousands of pages of intercepted Vox communications in a single sitting. There was a chirurgeon named Pallas, who could keep a man alive through injuries that should have killed him 6 times over, not out of mercy, but because dead men cannot answer questions. There were sanctioned psychers, kept in shackled harnesses that crackled with hexagrammic wards. And then there were the acolytes, the new ones, the expendable ones, us. I spent my first 3 years doing things that had no apparent connection to one another. 1 month, I would be stationed in a scriptorium, copying shipping manifests by hand for 12 hours a day, looking for numerical anomalies. B. The next month I would be deployed to a lower Hive settlement to observe a preacher whose sermons had begun attracting unusual crowds. I would sit in the congregation and listen and watch and report everything I saw. Once, I was ordered to deliver a sealed case to a location on level 61 and told to wait exactly 47 minutes for someone to collect it. No one came. I waited the 47 minutes and returned. When I reported the failed delivery, Inquisitor Vale simply nodded and said, "Good." I later learned that the delivery itself was meaningless. The test was whether I would wait the exact number of minutes I had been told. 2 of the other new acolytes given similar tests had left early. They were reassigned. I never saw them again. I choose not to speculate about what reassigned meant. Being an acolyte taught me one thing above all others. Obedience is not agreement. You do not need to understand why you are doing something. You need to do it precisely, completely, and without deviation. The Inquisition does not explain itself to its lowest servants. It watches them. It tests them. And most of them fail, and they vanish into the vast machinery of the Imperium and are never spoken of again. The ones who remain are the ones who learn to see patterns in the chaos, to notice the 8-pointed wings when everyone else saw 7. I was 17 when Inquisitor Vale called me into her private study for the first time. The room smelled of old paper and the faint ozone tang of a recently discharged plasma cell. She sat behind a desk carved from Terran oak, its surface covered in data slates and parchment scrolls. A human skull sat on the corner of the desk, gilded in silver, its eye sockets fitted with tiny lumen globes that cast a warm amber light. She told me to sit. "You have a talent," she said. "You see what others miss. You count what others ignore. I am going to teach you how to make people tell you the things they would rather die than speak aloud." I asked her what she meant. "I am making you an explicator," she said. "You are going to learn the art of extracting truth from flesh." The rank of Explicator is the first formal step on the path toward becoming an Inquisitor. It is not a promotion in any conventional sense. It is a marking. Your master has looked at you and decided that you are not merely useful, but potentially worthy of one day bearing the Inquisitorial rosette yourself. This distinction sounds like an honor. It did not feel like one. Inquisitor Vale taught me interrogation, not the crude methods of the Adeptus Arbites, with their shock mauls and their shouted questions. Inquisitorial interrogation is a discipline as refined and as brutal as any martial art. I learned the 37 points of the human body, where pain can be applied without risk of death or permanent damage to cognitive function. I learned how to read involuntary micro-expressions, the twitch of an eyelid, the dilation of a pupil, the way a subject's breathing changes half a second before they lie. I learned how to use chemical compounds that dissolve a subject's resistance without destroying their memory. I learned the operation of the auto-rack, the neural probe, and the psych scalpel. And I learned something worse. I learned how to use kindness as a weapon, how to make a subject trust you, rely on you, believe that you are the only person in the galaxy who understands them. And then, when their defenses are gone and their soul is open, to reach inside and take what you need. The first time I broke a man, truly broke him, extracted every secret from his mind until he was an empty vessel weeping on the floor of an interrogation cell on sub-level 19. I went to my quarters afterward and vomited until there was nothing left. The taste of bile stayed in my mouth for 3 days. I told myself it was necessary. I told myself the man had been a heretic, a member of a Tsaentian cult that had infiltrated the Hive's water purification systems. Thousands of lives were at stake. All of this was true. None of it made the vomit taste any different. I was an explicator for 6 years. In that time, I conducted over 200 interrogations. I refined my techniques. I developed methods that Inquisitor Vale herself adopted. I stopped vomiting. I am not sure whether that was a sign of strength or the first symptom of something breaking inside me that would never be repaired. On my 23rd birthday, which I celebrated alone with a tin of reclaimed protein paste and a glass of distilled water in my quarters on level 44, Inquisitor Vale summoned me again. She told me I was being elevated to the rank of Interrogator. This was different. An interrogator is not merely a student. An interrogator is an apprentice. The distinction matters enormously. As an explicator, I had been learning skills. As an interrogator, I was being groomed to one day replace my master. Inquisitor Vale gave me my own rosette that day. It was smaller than hers, less ornate, and it lacked the full cryptographic authority of a true Inquisitor's seal. But it bore the sigil of the Inquisition, the stylized eye with the skull at its center. And when I held it in my palm, it was warm. Not from the metal, from something deeper. From the psychoreactive circuitry embedded within that responded to the biosignature that had been encoded into my nervous system during the implantation ceremony. This seal, Vale told me, will open doors that were previously closed to you. It will grant you access to restricted archives, classified Vox channels, and secure facilities across this sector. It will also paint a target on your back that will never come off. She wasn't exaggerating. As an interrogator, I began leading operations of my own, small ones at first, surveillance missions in neighboring Hive cities, infiltration of suspected cult cells, liaison work with Adeptus Arbite's precinct commanders who didn't know whether to be grateful for my presence or terrified of it. Most were both. I carried a bolt pistol now, sanctified and inscribed with hexagrammic wards. I wore carapace armor beneath my coat. I had my own acolytes, 3 of them, hand-picked by Vale from the newest intake. The first time one of my acolytes died under my command, I was 26. Her name was Celine Dre. She was 19. We were conducting a raid on a warehouse in the Korinthus docking district that intelligence suggested was a storage point for Xenos artifacts being smuggled in from the Halo stars. The intelligence was correct. What it did not mention was that the artifacts included a live Hrood, a creature of temporal distortion that had been dormant inside a containment cask. When we breached the warehouse, the cask's seals had already failed. The Hrood's entropy field expanded. Celine was closest. I watched her age 50 years in 4 seconds. Her skin wrinkled, her hair turned white, her bones became brittle, and her knees buckled, and she fell. And by the time she hit the ground, she was an old woman. And by the time I reached her, she was dust. Her flak armor collapsed inward around nothing. Her bolt pistol clattered against the ferrocrete floor. I filed the casualty report that night. Under cause of death, I wrote, temporal displacement via Xeno's entropic field. Under assessment of operational outcome, I wrote, mission successful. Artifacts secured. I did not write that I could still hear the sound her bones had made as they crumbled. I did not write that I sat in the dark for 4 hours afterward and thought about whether any of this was worth it, but I kept climbing. I served as interrogator for 11 years. In that time, I accompanied Inquisitor Vale on 37 major operations, spanning 4 subsectors. I saw worlds that had been consumed by chaos from the inside, their populations twisted into forms that no longer resembled anything human. I saw an Ordo Malleus Inquisitor bind a daemon of Khorne into a hexagrammic prison no larger than a man's fist, the entity screaming in a voice that made my nose bleed and my fillings vibrate. I saw a Death Watch kill team, Space Marines of the Ordo Xenos' chamber militant, extract a Genestealer patriarch from the governor's palace of a world called Thesson IV, and I saw the look in the governor's eyes when he realized that his wife, his children, his entire bloodline had been compromised for 3 generations. I learned that the galaxy is larger and more terrible and more complicated than the sermons of the ecclesiarchy will ever tell you. On the day I received my full Inquisitorial rosette, I was 34 standard years old. The ceremony, if you can call it that, took place in a chamber beneath the Conclave Fortress on Scintilla. The room was small, maybe 6 meters by 4, with walls of bare stone and a single lumen globe hanging from the ceiling. 3 Inquisitors stood before me. That is the requirement. 3 Inquisitors must give their consent, or a single Inquisitor Lord. Inquisitor Vale stood to the left. To her right was Inquisitor Aldrin Sark of the Ordo Malleus, a man whose face looked like it had been carved from granite and left in the rain for a century. And in the center stood Inquisitor Lord Gloriana Hex, who was so old that her skin had the color and texture of parchment, and whose eyes were replaced by augmetic lenses that glowed a faint blue-white. Inquisitor Lord Hex spoke first. Mordecai Thane, you stand before the holy orders of the Emperor's Inquisition. Do you accept the burden that is about to be placed upon you, knowing that it will consume every part of the life you have known? I said yes. Do you understand that from this moment forward, you answer to no authority save the Emperor himself and the judgment of your peers? I said yes. Do you understand that you will be required to make decisions that will damn you in the eyes of ordinary men, and that you must make them anyway? I said yes. She placed the rosette in my hand. It was heavier than the Interrogator's seal, denser. It hummed against my palm with a frequency I could feel in my teeth. The psychoreactive circuitry bonded to my biosignature in a process that felt like a small electric shock running from my fingertips to the base of my skull. Then rise, Inquisitor Thane, she said, and may the Emperor have mercy on your soul, for the galaxy will not. I left that chamber, and I was alone in a way I had never been before. As an Acolyte, I had veil. As an Explicator, I had veil. As an Interrogator, I had veil. Now I was a full Inquisitor of the Ordo Hereticus. I had the authority to requisition any military force in the Imperium. I had the authority to declare exterminatus on a world if I judged it beyond salvation. I had the authority to condemn any citizen, any soldier, any governor, any priest to death with a single word. And I had no one to tell me whether my judgment was right. That is the thing the archives do not capture: the loneliness. An Inquisitor's authority is essentially unlimited, but so is the responsibility. There is no commanding officer to whom you can defer. There is no regulations manual that covers every situation. There is you, and there is the decision, and there is the consequence. And if you get it wrong, worlds burn. I chose the Ordo Hereticus because that is where Veil had trained me, and because I believed, perhaps naively, that the greatest threat to humanity came not from the alien or the daemon, but from within. From the human heart that turns away from the Emperor's light. I still believe this. I have seen Xeno's horrors that defy description. I have seen warp entities that exist in colors that have no name. But nothing I have encountered in 163 years of service frightens me more than a human being who has made the conscious, deliberate choice to betray their own species. My first decade as a full Inquisitor was consumed by work. I built my retinue piece by piece. A former Tempestus scion named Balus Kren, who had lost his left arm to an orc chopper on Armageddon and replaced it with a bionic that could crush ceramite. A savant named Iphigenia, whose eidetic memory was so precise she could recall the exact wording of a document she had read 40 years earlier. A sanctioned psyker named Theros Vor, whose talents were modest, but whose loyalty was absolute. I took on acolytes of my own, watching them the way Veil had watched me, looking for the ones who counted the points on the wings. I led investigations that spanned years. I broke heretical cults on 9 worlds. I uncovered a network of Slaneshi corruption inside a Schola Progenium on Cypramundi that had been operating for 3 generations, embedding tainted graduates into the Adepta Sororitas, the Commissariat, and the Inquisition itself. That investigation alone took 4 years and cost 17 members of my retinue their lives. When it was over, I ordered the Schola razed to its foundations and the ground salted with blessed dust. I did not celebrate. I went to my ship, and I sat in my quarters, and I stared at the wall, and I thought about the 38 children who had been born inside that Schola and raised as unwitting vessels of corruption, and who had been executed on my order because there was no way to determine how deep the taint ran. 38 children. That is the cost of the rank of Inquisitor. The title of Inquisitor Lord came to me when I was 61 standard years old, 27 years of service as a full Inquisitor. The title, as the records will tell you, is not technically a promotion, it is an honorific. A recognition by your peers that your power, your influence, and your record of service have elevated you to a position of exceptional authority within the Inquisition. In practice, it means that other Inquisitors defer to your judgment. It means that when you speak at conclave, the room falls silent. It means that you can elevate an interrogator to the rank of full Inquisitor with your word alone, without the consent of 2 additional peers. I was granted the title after the purging of Thrax. I will not describe that operation in detail, What I will say is this. A world of 1.4 billion souls had fallen to a chaos insurrection so complete that the planetary governor himself had been revealed as a servant of Nurgle. The infection had spread through the water table, the crops, the air. 70% of the population was showing signs of corruption. The Astra Militarum garrison had been overrun. The Sisters of Battle had been deployed and were holding a perimeter around the planet's only remaining starport. I called for exterminatus. I stood on the bridge of the Imperial Navy cruiser, Sanctified Wrath, and I watched through the viewport as cyclonic torpedoes reduced Thrax to a burning sphere of molten rock. I watched 1.4 billion human souls die. I watched and I did not look away, because I owed them that. If I was going to end them, I was going to watch it happen. Inquisitor Lord Hex, who was still alive at the time, 230 years old and sustained by augmetics and juvenate treatments and sheer fury, sent me a single astropathic message after the fact. It read, "Correct decision. The burden is now yours." 3 months later, the conclave of the Calixian sector convened and I was named Inquisitor Lord. The ceremony was brief. Hex placed a sigil of office around my neck, a golden chain bearing a larger, more ornate version of the Inquisitorial rosette, set with a single bloodstone from the mines of Holy Terra itself. It weighed almost nothing. It felt like a mountain. An Inquisitor Lord's life is different from a field Inquisitor's in ways that are both subtle and profound. You still conduct operations. You still hunt heretics and demons and aliens. But you also become a political creature. You attend conclave sessions. You adjudicate disputes between Inquisitors whose investigations overlap or conflict. You review the records of your peers and determine whether their methods are acceptable or whether they have strayed too far into radicalism or dogmatism. You make judgments about other Inquisitors. You become both enforcer and judge of the very organization you serve. I sat in judgment over 11 Inquisitors during my time as Lord. 6 were found wanting but redeemable and were given penance assignments. 3 were declared excommunicate traitorous and hunted down. 2 were executed in my presence, 1 by my own hand. Inquisitor Harvel Crane, who had bound a daemon host and used it to assassinate a rival within the conclave. I shot him with my bolt pistol at a range of 3 meters. The bolt entered his chest and detonated inside his ribcage. He did not die immediately. He looked at me with surprise, as if he genuinely could not understand why binding a daemon to do his political bidding was considered a transgression. "But I used it for the Imperium," he said. Those were his last words. I cleaned the blood from my coat that night. The stain never fully came out of the leather. I kept the coat. Then came the title of Master. Where an Ordo has a strong presence in a given sector, the senior Inquisitor Lord of that Ordo may be granted the title of Master. The Master oversees the activities of their Ordo within the sector, guides its members, and serves as counsel to the Grandmaster of the Conclave. In the Calixian sector, the Ordo Hereticus had a presence of over 40 active Inquisitors. When the previous Master, Lord Inquisitor Thaliarine, was killed during an ambush by the Alpha Legion, the position fell to me. I was 79 years old. The juvenile treatments had kept my body in the condition of a man of perhaps 45. My hair had gone grey at the temples, but my hands were steady and my mind was sharp. I took the title, and I convened my first council of Ordo Hereticus Inquisitors in the Fortress Monastery on Scintilla. Being a master is being a shepherd. Your flock is made up of the most dangerous, most intelligent, most ruthless individuals in the sector. Each of them carries the authority to destroy worlds. Each of them believes their judgment is correct. Your job is to ensure that their individual pursuits serve the greater purpose of the Ordo without collapsing into infighting, rivalry, or the kind of radical excess that leads to corruption from within. I will be honest with you. There were nights when I missed being an acolyte, when the worst thing that could happen was that I miscounted a shipping manifest, and Vale gave me that look, the one that said, "Do better." There is a certain freedom in powerlessness. When you are at the bottom, the weight of the galaxy is someone else's burden. When you are at the top, it is yours, all of it. The full crushing mass of 10,000 years of paranoia and sacrifice and necessary evil. I served as master for 19 years. In that time, the Ordo Hereticus, under my guidance, dismantled the cult of the Shattered Throne across 8 subsectors. We identified and purged a heretical faction within the Departamento Munitorum that had been systematically diverting weapons shipments to chaos-aligned worlds. We uncovered a conspiracy within the ecclesiarchy itself, a sect of Thorian radicals who believed they could resurrect the Emperor by channeling his psychic power through a network of martyred saints. That investigation cost me my left eye. A Thorian zealot drove a blessed nail through it during an ambush on Malfi. I replaced it with an augmetic that sees into the infrared spectrum. It gives me headaches. I've grown used to them. I was 98 when I was elevated to Grandmaster. The Grandmaster of a conclave is the highest formal authority within the Inquisition in a given sector or subsector. The title is sometimes given to the Inquisitor Lord who runs the conclave, the body that governs. To the degree that the Inquisition can be said to be governed at all, the collective activities of every Inquisitor operating within that region of space. The Grandmaster is chosen by secret ballot between the 3 masters, 1 from each Ordo Majoris, upon the death or retirement of the previous Grandmaster. Grandmaster Corvin Reth of the Ordo Malleus had been killed by a Keeper of Secrets during the demonic incursion on Fenk's world. Master Aldrin Sark of the Ordo Malleus, the same man who had stood at my elevation to Inquisitor 64 years earlier, now ancient and scarred and missing both legs below the knee, replaced by augmetic stilts that clicked against the stone floor when he walked, cast his vote for me. Master Yesel Dane of the Ordo Xenos cast her vote for me. I abstained because the rules required it. I became Grandmaster of the Calixian Conclave. The weight of it was indescribable. A Grandmaster does not merely oversee one Ordo. A Grandmaster oversees all of them. Every investigation, every operation, every Inquisitor in the sector answers, at least in theory, to the Grandmaster's authority. In practice, Inquisitors are independent and jealously guard that independence, and the Grandmaster's role is less about command and more about mediation. You are the final arbiter of disputes. You are the one who decides when an Inquisitor has gone too far. You are the one who authorizes the most extreme measures, the exterminatus orders, the deployment of the Chamber's militant, the censuring of a rogue Inquisitor whose methods have become indistinguishable from the enemy's. I held the rank of Grandmaster for 31 years. In that time, I authorized 4 exterminatus orders, 4 worlds. I remember each of their names. Thrax had been the first, back when I was a Field Inquisitor. As Grandmaster, I signed the death warrants for Callista Prime, Drevnar, Shale's World, and Tertium Majoris. Each one was necessary. Each one was an admission that we had failed. That the Inquisition, with all its power, all its resources, all its terrifying authority, had not been able to save those worlds. We could only end them. 31 years. I grew old during those years, despite the juvenile treatments. 129 years of service takes its toll regardless of the chemicals in your blood. My augmetic eye developed a fault that made it flicker in low light. My left hand developed a tremor that no chirurgeon could fully correct. My mind was still sharp, but my body was failing. Slowly, inevitably, the way all mortal bodies fail. I had one more elevation left. It came in the form of an astropathic summons from Holy Terra itself. The Inquisitorial Representative to the Senatorum Imperialis, the voice of the Inquisition among the High Lords of Terra, had died. Lord Inquisitor Fyodor Karamazov, that infamous and terrible figure who had held the seat for decades, had finally perished during a battle against a demonic incursion in the Imperial Palace itself. His body immolated by warp fire, his throne of judgment shattered. A successor was required. I do not know why I was chosen. The politics of Terra are labyrinthine beyond comprehension, and the machinations of the Inquisition at that level involve a web of alliances, rivalries, debts, and betrayals that spans millennia. What I know is that a sealed communique arrived bearing the combined sigils of 9 Inquisitor Lords from across the Imperium, informing me that my name had been put forward and that the Senatorum Imperialis had accepted. I traveled to Terra. The journey took 14 months through the warp, and when I emerged and saw that ancient golden world hanging in the void, the birthplace of humanity, the throne world of the God Emperor himself. I wept. I am not ashamed to say it. 147 years of service. 147 years of blood and fire and decisions that cost billions of lives. And here was Terra. Here was home. Not my home, but humanity's home. The place where it all began. I walked the corridors of the Imperial Palace. Walls of gold and marble rose hundreds of meters above me. Cherubim drifted through air that smelled of incense and age, and something else, something that buzzed at the edge of perception, a psychic resonance that permeated every stone. The presence of the Emperor, not a metaphor, not a theological abstraction, a physical sensation, like standing near a bonfire, a warmth that sank through your skin and settled in your bones. The Senatorum Imperialis convened in a chamber so vast that the far wall was lost in haze. 12 seats, 12 of the most powerful individuals in the Imperium, each one representing an arm of the Emperor's might. The Master of the Administratum, the Lord Commander Militant of the Astra Militarum, the Fabricator General of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Ecclesiarch, and now, in the 13th seat, the one that sat slightly apart from the others, slightly in shadow, the Inquisitorial Representative, me. The seat was carved from black stone. It was cold when I sat in it. I placed my hands on the armrests, and I felt the weight of every rank I had ever held pressing down on me. Acolyte, Explicator, Interrogator, Inquisitor, Inquisitor Lord, Master, Grandmaster, and now this, the voice of the entire Inquisition, speaking in the halls where the Emperor's will is enacted. I will tell you what I learned, sitting in that seat. I learned that the Imperium is not a machine. It is not a system. It is not a government. It is a collective act of will, sustained by trillions of human beings who choose day after day to believe that the Emperor protects, that the fight is worth fighting, that the darkness can be held back, and the Inquisition, this shadowy, terrible, magnificent organization that had consumed my entire life, exists for one purpose, and one purpose only: not to destroy, not to judge, not to punish, but to ensure that the belief survives. Every heretic we burn, every cult we dismantle, every world we sacrifice, we do it so that the rest of humanity can continue to believe that something stands between them and the dark. We are not heroes. We are not saviors. We are the cost. We are the price that humanity pays for the luxury of hope. I am 177 standard years old now. The Juvenat treatments are failing. My augmetic eye flickers constantly. My hands shake. My memories are sharp, but my body is a ruin, held together by bionics and stubbornness, and a refusal to stop until the Emperor calls me home. I have been every rank in the Imperial Inquisition. I have been the orphan counting points on a counterfeit icon. I have been the acolyte sitting on a metal bench in a shuttle that smelled of gun oil. I have been the explicator vomiting after my first interrogation. I have been the interrogator watching a 19-year-old girl turn to dust. I have been the inquisitor standing on a bridge watching a world die. I have been the Inquisitor Lord judging my peers. I have been the master shepherding killers. I have been the Grandmaster signing death warrants. I have been the voice of the Inquisition in the halls of the Emperor himself. And if you ask me which rank was the hardest, I will tell you. It was all of them. Every single one. Because at every level the question is the same. The question that wakes you at 3 in the morning and sits on your chest like a stone and whispers in a voice that sounds like your own. Is this worth it? And the answer, the only answer that allows you to stand up and continue, is the same at every rank. It has to be. Because if it is not, then the 38 children died for nothing, and Celine Dre turned to dust for nothing, and Thrax burned for nothing, and 163 years of service was just an old man's vanity dressed in a golden rosette. I choose to believe it was worth it. I have to believe it was worth it. My name is Mordecai Thane. I have held every rank in the Holy Orders of the Emperor's Inquisition. I have seen the best and the worst of what humanity is capable of, and I have been responsible for both. I carry the weight of every decision, every death, every world I could not save, and every world I chose to destroy. And if the Emperor wills it, I will carry it until my last breath, and then I will carry it still into whatever darkness waits beyond. The Emperor protects, but someone has to pay for that protection. That someone is us.